Hello there, Foster Shock. Welcome to episode 2 of the Short Grass, your Kildare Nationalist sports podcast. We have a packed programme again this week where we'll be covering sponsorship announcements, Kildare GAA manager announcements, as well as the Kildare GAA Football Championship at senior, intermediate and indeed junior level. It's the Fab Four back again, or is it just the grumpy old men? Anyway, let's introduce ourselves. We have Ger McNally, who's the regional sports editor of the Kildare Nationalist, Richard Commins of the Kildare Nationalist, a reporter and a contributor and indeed a GAA historian of absolute note, and Tommy O'Connell of the Kildare Fan 2025 X account and a contributor to Kildare Nationalists and all those great graphics we see online and indeed in the newspaper. And I'm Pat Costello, and I'll try and keep this gang in check for the next hour or so. I used to have long flowing blonde hair until I started this crack, but now look at me. Anyway, gentlemen, great to see you all again, and hopefully you had a great week. We have another great week of championship football under our belt. But Ger, let's start this week. You have an announcement in relation to sponsorship of the Kildare Nationalist team of the week, or teams of the week rather.
Yes, indeed, Pat. Yes, obviously people will be aware of the teams of the week that we pick, and we'll be, I'm sure, discussing our picks later on in the show here. But just to give Darren and the team at Lifting and Loading in Crane there, I mentioned they have come on board as a sponsor of our teams of the week for the remainder of the championship season. So you'll see plenty of their logo on our graphics and stuff that Tommy has been able to add in. So I think Darren has a foot in both the Allenwood and Clane camps as well. So he's ahead for an interesting weekend with those two teams meeting at the senior championship. But just to say thanks to Darren and welcome on board, and hopefully he'll get the value out of sponsorship and enjoy being part of our teams of the week.
So there you are. The Kildare Nationalist team of the week will be the Loading and Lifting Kildare Nationalist team of the week going forward. So well done to everybody there. Next up, of course, is the announcement during the week of management updates or proposals that will go to the September county board meeting. At under 20 level, Niall Cronin steps up from being the minor manager to under 20 manager. Tommy Considine, he was involved with Brian Flanagan and indeed with Sean O'Dea in the under 20 setup for the last number of years. He will be nominated as the under 17 football manager, and the new name there, Brian Mornan, has been nominated for the under 17 hurling manager. A Limerick native, he was involved heavily with underage teams in Naas. He was the junior hurling chair in Naas as well. He was involved with Naas minors and indeed with the county development squad. So lads, 3 new names being proposed. Any comments there before we go forward? Congratulations.
Continuity, Pat, is exactly what you say. I mean, in fairness to Niall, like, there were a lot of names thrown around, but he would have been one of the first names that came up because of his knowledge of the players over the past couple of years. So people will have a lot of people have different opinions on it, and probably rightly so. But in fairness, I mean, there's probably not a player under the age of 20 in the county, or indeed under the age of 24 in the county, that he doesn't know and hasn't seen. So from that point of view, I mean, it's pretty good appointment in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, of course,
you'd see some negatives in terms of comments online, and that that he had 4 years with the minors, and we didn't win a Leinster in that time. And I think that's a fair point. I think Niall would probably share that disappointment himself. But I think from a positive perspective, there is the continuity. He knows the role. He knows the players that are coming through. I think anyone who's spoken to him, and we've seen him, in the depths of despair after some of those heartbreaking defeats in Leinster, I think his commitment to Kildare football certainly shines through when you talk to him. And, I think there's a resilience there, both personally in himself and in his ability to motivate disappointed youngsters, bringing them back from losing those Leinster games to winning 2 All-Ireland B titles, and those were against relatively strong counties. So, I think there's kind of a balance here. I think there's definitely a bit of a disappointment that we didn't do better over the last couple of years in minor in Leinster. But, I think the traits, that he's shown in bouncing back are real positives. And the other thing is, I don't think we don't know who went for the role. So it's very difficult for people to say, oh, the wrong man got it, when you don't know who else was in the mix.
Yeah. Well, of course,
that was what we aspired to. Sorry, Pat. That was what we aspired to when it was kind of en vogue, when Dublin were bringing through Jim Gavin and Desi Farrell, and they were kind of following, I think, even far back when it was under 14 teams and coming all the way through to eventually being senior manager. So if anything, it happened a year late, I suppose. Ideally, maybe Niall would have been maybe serve a 3-year term as a minor and then go in. But obviously, just the things didn't align there with senior level, or sorry, at under 20 level, because I think Sean O'Dea had only done 1 year at under 20 level when Niall finished his third. So he stayed on for what was probably an unplanned additional 4th year at minor level. But I think going back to Tommy's point, there's nobody, I think, in the county who will know that group of players and even around that group of players who maybe didn't get the nod to make the final matchday squads better than Niall. And there's often a kind of a desire for a fresh face or a fresh voice, but sometimes, that's kind of not maybe the best move. And I think maybe even Niall referenced as well that there was an awful lot of time spent with this 4th year minor term that he kind of had to get to know that group, and there was a couple of months lost maybe at the start of the year while he was picking his panel, that he won't have that betting in process at all at under 20 level. He'd be able to hit that ground running there, I think.
Now, of course, it's the old chestnut. Is it about winning silverware at underage level, or is it about developing players? And I think it's fair to say, if it's about developing players, quite a number of players have been developed and are now part of Brian Flanagan's team over the last number of years, even if silverware wasn't there. Well, it was there at under 20 level, obviously 2 years ago now. Was it 3 years ago now at this stage? But it's all about whether it's a development. And I think the writing instructions, certainly in the past, has been that it's all about development from the county board level.
His backroom team will be interesting. Sorry, Richard. I just said his backroom team will be interesting to see who he brings in, because you'd imagine like the guys that has been with him for the last couple of years at minor, likes of Emmett O'Keefe there. It'd be interesting when you bring him in. But I'd say we'll see a couple of interesting appointments from backroom, because it's a very attractive role. Any involvement in under 20 football is an attractive role for anybody. Looking to develop their own CV.
Putting your hand up, Tommy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to add, Pat, if I could. I do think there's a slight nuance between under 17 and under 20. And I think when you get to under 20, it is a little bit more about results. And I think, Brian Flanagan showed, the benefit of actually developing players while winning. And, we've seen where he's gone on to. And then you've got his players coming through into the senior team now that have that experience of winning and have that confidence from it. So I think that is a slight step up when you do get to under 20 level, and a slight difference in priority.
Anyway, we're all getting excited already, and it's only coming up to September, but new manager appointments to be made at the September County Board meeting at under 20 football level, Niall Cronin, and under 17 level, Tommy Considine, and under 17 hurling level, Brian Murnane. So best of luck to all of them. Lads, we're into the championship again, another round coming up, and last week, round 1, we had in Group A in the Senior Championship, that's the Joe Malin Motors Senior Football Championship, we had a win for Athy in Group A, and we had a draw between Johnstown Bridge and Selbridge. In Group B, we had wins for Sallins and Naas. In Group C, we had wins for Moorfield and Clane, and then in Group D, we had wins for Tara and Carberry. Richard, who were the main winners and losers in the Joe Malin Motors Senior Football Championship in round 1?
In terms of winners, can I put a team in who drew?
Yeah,
because I'm going to anyway. I think in terms of performances, in terms of I suppose wins, unexpected wins or draws, Johnstown Bridge for me. I think getting that draw against Selbridge, they came back from 7 behind at halftime. They had a fantastic third quarter, led by 4. I think it was midway through that second half, and maybe might feel they could have pushed on and won it in the end. We'll talk about Selbridge maybe in a little bit in terms of those that didn't do so well at the weekend. So I think Johnstown Bridge are the first ones I'd call out. I think Athy obviously had another big win against Clockerinco. They'll face Selbridge. We'll do a preview shortly. They'll face Selbridge this weekend in a big game, and it'll be interesting to see how they go in that one against a step up in opposition. They're certainly spreading the scores around. That's one of the big things I see about them, and they've managed to bring in a few very exciting looking youngsters this year. So looking good for Athy so far, but let's see, when they meet Selbridge at the weekend, whether they can keep that going. I think then Sarsfields and Naas obviously improved, I think, on their preliminary round performances, both winning, both up their games from an attacking perspective in particular. Very impressed with the 2 Sarsfields youngsters, as we'll talk about when we get to the team of the week. Both, though, conceded 2 goals, and that's twice in a row Naas have done that. So I think there's still work to do from a defensive perspective for both teams. Neither really have that locked down just yet. And then when you look at Group D, Cara, I think, had the big win, crucial win for them over Easttown, and a very impressive one as well. That kind of gets them looking upwards rather than downwards. And the same for Carberry with their win. They're both of those on 2 points now, and it's Confi and Easttown who are looking a little bit more in peril. So I guess in terms of the losers, yes, Selbridge, they're really not hitting form in their opening couple of games. They're not really adding up to the sum of their parts, I suppose, when you look at the big players that they have. They have Kevin O'Callaghan back there at the weekend, but still, they'll have expected to win that one and obviously didn't. Easttown look in real danger. They obviously had a couple of players back last weekend, but still shipped a pretty big defeat. So I think they're looking in danger at the moment, along with probably Confi, Kilcock and Alan Wood in terms of the relegation. The other big losers, I thought Raheens probably would have expected to do a lot better against Sarsfields, and they really fell off in the second half there and shipped a big win and a big defeat in the end. That was a little bit unexpected.
Yeah. I think in my introduction, Salons will be absolutely delighted to hear that they've been promoted to Group B in the Joe Malamota Senior Football Championship. I should have said Sarsfields, of course, and Naas were the winners in Group B. If you want a goal of the year, you wouldn't look past a tie goal on Friday night. It was absolutely brilliant, from Roy Crofton goal all the way to the goal scorer. It was absolutely brilliant. Real team goal. We could have had a goal of the week competition if maybe we could use a few clips. There was Kerwin's goal, a few others as well. Flanagan, I think, for Maynooth scored a goal. Sponsorship opportunity for somebody there, Ger.
Yeah, we'll take all sponsorship on board as well. But Gibbons as well for Kilcock scored a cracking goal too as well. Yeah. Some great goals. I think I'd anointed Derek Kerwin's goal on Friday. I think I was doing the live blog on the Kildare Nationalist website, and I'd mentioned that maybe Derek Kerwin's goal could be the goal of the championship. And less than 24 hours later, Gibbons got an unbelievable goal for Kilcock that kind of had me scratching my head already and maybe picking another one. But yeah, it's good to see some high quality goals.
That a tie goal, Pat. That kind of shows where they are this year. What I've seen of a tie this year, that's what they're all about. Really quick transition up the field, moving it fast, getting it to the pacey players as quickly as possible. But that from front, I saw a lot of that against Easttown as well. They really, that running game this year, there's no fluting around with the ball on the halfway line waiting for lads to get into position. They're just getting up the field quickly. Same even Derek Kerwin's goal the other night. That was, I look back I was there and I was actually dead level with him when he kicked it. And it was, I haven't seen a shot at Hardy. If you see the new nets in St. Conleth's Park, they have those plastic kind of frames at the bottom. And the frame flipped up at the end with the power of it. I might ask Mark Donald now, did he see any of it at all before it hit the net?
Well, it was against such a good goalkeeper as well.
Of course, the tie goal was made all the better by the commentator on the night, I think. Anyway, but apart from that,
made it, Pat.
You mentioned Carberry, or you mentioned who was it? Clane? No, who did you mention? Confi and Easttown there, Richard. But they are teams that every year people think they're in trouble, and they always pull out a big one. Do you see that this year? Anyway?
Yeah, Confi in particular, Easttown haven't really been in the mix even for relegation, I don't think, in the last couple of years. They've actually come out of the traps pretty fast and, been very competitive. So I'm not quite sure, other than obviously they've lost a couple of players in the early stages. So, they may come strong. I still would imagine I'd fancy them to get a win that gets them out of it. Confi, as you say, every year they seem to pick a win out of somewhere, and they've been pretty competitive in their 2 games to date. So that's going to be one hell of a game when those two meet, actually.
Johnstown Bridge, even without the great Dan, that was some comeback. They were gone at half time, and yet they came back, and as you said, Richard, probably could have won and maybe had chances near the end to win it.
Yeah, and very impressive performance generally from Johnstown Bridge. It wasn't any one player that was driving them on. Obviously, they've got Paul Cribben now concentrating fully on the club and injury free. I was actually particularly impressed with the half back line as well. We picked, not giving anything away, obviously we've published it already, but we picked Ger McNally from the half-back line on our team of the week, but it could have been any of the three of them.
Yeah.
So I just thought they were very solid all around, and they scored some fantastic 2-pointers. I don't think Selbridge got a 2-pointer from memory. Johnstown Bridge got 2 or 3. McNally got one. I think Dara Sloan got one. Paul Cribben may have got one as well.
Yeah, there was about 3 or 4. Yeah.
So, you know, they're playing very well, very confident this year. So, you know, it may have seemed a surprise, but it was a well-merited draw, that one.
It certainly was.
Selbridge were caught cold, Pat. You were commentating on that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I had no involvement in the Selbridge demise after halftime.
If you look at I couldn't believe it. I was watching genuinely. It kept coming back, and I was thinking, Selbridge, you know, they'll stay 3 or 4 ahead, and then the 2-pointers kept going over.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think back, something similar happened against Clane as well, except Clane weren't able to take advantage of it.
That's right.
So Johnstown Bridge were able to take their scores, whereas Selbridge didn't score for the first 14 minutes, I think, of the second half of the Clane game.
Yeah.
And just Clane weren't able to take advantage of that at all. Now, Selbridge obviously got back. That goal was huge, massive. Obviously, that changed the game. And then literally last kick of the game, Aaron Brown to get the draw.
Yeah.
Literally the last kick. I just, you know, they were very lucky to get out of that with a point.
Yeah,
maybe they're pacing themselves for later on. You know, they've obviously been to finals and haven't probably performed as well as they want. So maybe they're just focusing on peaking later on.
Yeah, that's a possibility. And in fairness, Tony Archibald, he kind of kept them in the game and drove them on in that second half, and had a very, very good performance. Just on that particular one, Richard, there are those who might be suggesting that high have peaked too early.
Yeah, I don't know about that. You know, obviously you look at their results and you say, wow, they've certainly hit the ground running. I think it's probably, you know, no disrespect to Alan Wood or Clough-Rinco, but they're probably not the two strongest teams currently in terms of their resources. Both are missing some significant enough players. So I think that we'll see a lot more this weekend when Athy play Selbridge. So I don't know if it's peaking too early. You know, there is maybe that danger, but I think it's more related to the opposition that they had, and the fact that, you know, obviously they're well trained and they're getting up a good head of steam. But you know, they certainly have enough youth to imagine they can keep that going.
2 more points then on the overview of the Joe Mann Motor Senior Football Championship Round 1. Are Moorfield being Moorfield and are Clane being Clane?
Is that for me?
That's for everybody. Jerry, you saw Moorfield, didn't you?
Yeah, they got the job done in the end. To be honest, I was pretty impressed with Alan Wood for at least 3 quarters, maybe even more, that game. And, you know, for a side who had lost 12 in a row, including 11 games in Division 1 and the preliminary round, that they weren't a side who looked short in confidence. And we've kind of been speaking about maybe the relegation battlers, and it looks to be between those 4 teams who have lost both games so far. And the one advantage that Alan Wood would have over those other sides would be they have real scorers and carry a real scoring threat, and the likes of Owen Bagnall and Joey Cunningham in the forward line. You know, they've a bit of pace, a bit of movement, and fellas who aren't afraid to take on a shot. And it took a lot of work for Moorfield to get over the line in the end. Aaron Masterson, he got a close range goal, and then I'm sure probably people have seen the video of his 2-pointer from the very last kick of the game from, was 60 meters plus, was it? He started his run up on the 65. He took a couple of steps before landing it over the crossbar, and it just shows that, you know, there's probably a bit of a breeze behind Aaron's back. But like often you see lads, Aaron himself had the ball in his hands. It was obviously the dying seconds of the match. The game was probably won at that stage. You know, anyway, he was looking behind him. He was going to pass it backwards, looking sideways. Nothing really on, and then you could almost see him say to himself, you know, I'm just going to take this on, and I did it. And you just wonder sometimes if lads, if they had that belief in themselves and maybe encouragement sometimes from the sideline as well. Like managers, if that had gone wide, would be saying, you know, maybe what you should have kept the ball. But these players have huge ability, and you know, when you see Aaron launching a ball over from 60 meters, you know, it was a bit of a win, but not much of a win. You know, it was an incredible score to get that win. And Clane then against Kilcock, what another strange game. And you know, for 50 minutes, Clane were absolutely cruising towards victory. And, you know, saying about Alan Wood not looking like a side who are down on the luck or low in confidence, for 50 minutes, Kilcock really did look like that side. You know, they looked like a side who were just being worn down by a difficult Division 2 league campaign, and Clane were pretty much cruising. But then, you know, we almost saw probably the most remarkable comeback that I've ever seen in a senior championship game. Kilcock got a goal back through on Flood. Then Gibbons scored that wonderful goal that we mentioned. They're still kind of 5 points down and still kind of Crane had them at arm's length, but then Mark Gibbons hit the inside of the posts in about 2 minutes to go, and that gone in. At that stage, Crane were really rocking, and you would have fancied Kilcock to one and maybe turned that one around. But yeah, Kilcock, they got, I think I was on KFM doing updates of that game, and beforehand I just said that even win, lose or draw, that Kilcock just needed some sort of positive to take out of that game. So I think out of that last 10 minutes, they definitely will take something forward into the remaining games, because they're a side who are without some key players. Like, Daniel Courtney, Shane Farrell, Jason Gibbons are three kind of county players almost thereabouts, or at that level. Certainly Shane showed what he could do at the end of the previous year, and Daniel and Jason have been on senior county teams before, and if those three players were available, Kilcock would be a very different side. So Shane O'Rourke also went off injured as well. That was a big blow for them with about 15 minutes to go, which made their kind of near comeback all the more remarkable. But if Shane O'Rourke was missing for any length of time now, and I think here mentioned that maybe he broke a finger or something like that, or maybe a bone in his hand, which would be a huge blow if he was unavailable for any length of time.
And finally, then, should Cara be happy with where they are? Got a good win last weekend, and now they play Confrey on this weekend on Friday night. Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. A lot of times you do see the intermediate champions coming up and struggling a little bit. It's a big leap. But I think that gap is closing a lot over the last couple of years. I think the gap between, possibly the bottom six in the senior championship and the top 4 or 6 in the intermediate, there's not too much there because of the standard of the intermediate at the moment. But that was a serious performance from Cara at the weekend. Like, we know Eadstown are struggling, but Cara had to get the job done, and it was a good performance against Raheens as well in that first round. So they're looking to kick on now against Confrey, and even to top that group and get straight into a quarterfinal. There's the serious performances there as well. Dan Lynham as well, we saw at the weekend. It's like he's such a boost for Cara. Seeing the intermediate championship last year as well, he was injured for a couple of games. He's just such an important player because they have quality all over the field. Players that we know, like county players like Burke and Dara Swords. But you see his influence. But things looking good for Cara so far, Pat.
Okay, well, you can read all the reports on all those round 1 matches in the Kildare Nationalist, which is out this week. Let's have a look at the fixtures then. In Group A, we have Selbridge versus Athy. That's on Saturday at 2 p.m. in Cedarville, St. Conleth's Park. And then Johnstown Bridge versus Claharenka on Sunday at 3:45 in Cedarville, St. Conleth's Park. That's a Northwest derby. In Group B, it's another derby, I suppose you might call it. Raheens versus Naas. That's on Saturday in Mangard 1 at 5:45. And then we have Sarsfields versus Maynooth on Sunday in Cedarville, St. Conleth's Park at 2 p.m. In Group C, it's Clane versus Allenwood on Saturday in Mangard 1 at 7:15. And Kilcock versus Moorfield is on Friday in Mangard 1 at 8 o'clock. And Group D, Confrey versus Cara, as you mentioned there, Tommy, on Friday in Cedarville, St. Conleth's Park at 7:45. And Eadstown versus Carbery on Saturday in Cedarville, St. Conleth's at 3:45. Games of the weekend, I'm suggesting Selbridge versus Athy, Johnstown Bridge versus Claharenka, Raheens versus Naas, Sarsfields versus Maynooth. Lads, it's all 16.
That's matches. All 8 of
them. all 8 matches are all 16 in matches in the senior and intermediate. We talk about it in golf, a moving weekend or a moving day. Is this the moving weekend in the Kildare Senior Football Championship, or indeed in all the Kildare Championships?
Yeah, I think there's some really good games down for decision there this weekend. Obviously, Athy versus Selbridge is a standout fixture for me this weekend. Really looking forward to seeing. We've kind of mentioned about Athy, how they've maybe been playing some of the sides who are struggling for form a little bit in Eadstown and Claharenka. Well, they're going to have to step it up. Selbridge are going to have to be an awful lot better than they have been. So I'm really looking forward to that game. Sarsfields and Maynooth is another one to watch out for, because I think Maynooth were another side who played really well, albeit not getting the result that they would have liked last weekend. That they really put it up to Naas, and Ross Glavin has gone in there this year with Maynooth at kind of short notice, taken over there, probably not great circumstances, but he's done a fantastic job in a short time. Got them kind of rounded off the job in terms of getting them into the league semi-final. Probably weren't great against Naas that day, but they were much more competitive there last weekend against Naas. And Sarsfields, who themselves kind of, certainly in the last 20 minutes we mentioned as well against Raheens, they absolutely blew Raheens away. They scored the last 2 goals and 9 points in a championship game that for 40 minutes had been nip and tuck all the way was very impressive, and even more so when you think that they were without Darragh Ryan, who was probably the player of the match in the preliminary round. So I think that's another really good game, and obviously Ross Glavin has the Moorfield links as well, just to add even more into the mix there. So that's definitely another game to look out for, I think, there too. But yeah, I think right across the championship, both of them, certainly the senior and intermediate championship, there's games that really catch the eye, and the local derby with Johnstown Bridge and Clougharinco, and there's another one there as well, and Johnstown Bridge will be strong favourites there, I suppose, on the basis of their draw last week against Selbridge. But you know, it's a local derby, and as I say, form goes out the window in a local derby, and Clougharinco have men that can hurt Johnstown Bridge if they're not at the best too.
Yeah, indeed. Richard, who do you predict that might do well this weekend?
Oh my God!
No, he's not playing.
Well, you'd have to fancy a tie in the Selbridge game based on form, but you know, if you look at it before the season or before the championship started, that would have looked like a very even game. But you'd have to plump for a tie there. I think Johnstown Bridge and Clougharinco, local derby. I mean, Clougharinco could easily put the cat among the pigeons there in that group, which has already developed into an interesting group with that draw last weekend. I think that'll be close enough. I'd imagine Johnstown Bridge will just get through it. And then he couldn't go against in Group B, he couldn't go against really nascent Sarsfields there based on what we've seen so far. I think, as Ger says, Sarsfield's Maynooth in particular looks a particularly good game. And if Raheens can find some of that scoring form, Sarsfield did such a job on their inside forward line last week. But if Jack Taft, Paddy Woodgate, etc., and Liam Power was in there as well, causing a bit of havoc, you know, if they can get that moving, then Naas have shown that they're a little bit vulnerable on the goal side. They've conceded 4 in their 2 games, but you'd expect Naas really and Sarsfields both to come through those. I'm a bit of a masochist. I actually sometimes prefer the dog fights at the bottom where teams are trying to avoid relegation. So I'd be looking forward to Eadstown and Carbery in Group D in particular, and to see whether Kilcock can pull something out of the fire. And Alan Wood against Clane, I wouldn't, as Ger said, they played quite well the other day, so I wouldn't rule them out against Clane by any means either. Yeah. I think Eadstown might beat Carbery. Okay. There's my shock. Okay. If it wouldn't have been a shock before the season started, but it might be seen as a shock now given the way things have gone. But I think Eadstown will get it together at some point, and that could be the one they get it together in.
Finally, Tommy, what's your nap of the weekend from the Senior Football Championship point of view?
Nap? Carbery to beat Eadstown.
Carbery to beat Eadstown.
That losers group, the first one you were speaking with there with Clane and Allenwood, Kilcock and Moorfield. I mean, that again, I said the last day that Allenwood, you know, could take a bit of confidence from their second half performance in the preliminary round against Clougharinco. But you can say the same for the last day. You know, they can take something from this game, but they do need to get results, and they do need to get at least one result. So if it doesn't go their way this weekend, and if it doesn't go Kilcock's way this weekend, then that final round game is basically, you know, that's your playoff to see who goes into the relegation final between Kilcock and Allenwood. But it might not go that way. Again, like Allenwood could easily turn over Clane, and I don't know if the last 10 minutes Kilcock can turn up against Moorfield. You never know. But yeah, some great games there this weekend.
There you go. That's it. That's our preview of the Joe Malamoto Senior Football Championship. Moving on swiftly to the first ever the loading and lifting Kildare Forklifts Kildare Nationalist Senior Football Team of the Week. And let's have a look at that there, Tommy. Yes, it's up there. We'll give you the line out first of all. Owen Sheehan of Johnstown Bridge is the goalkeeper. Full back line, Tom Aspel of Sarsfields, Portix Spillane of Athy, and Hugh Prendergast of Clane. The halfbacks then Tony Archibald of Selbridge, Niall O'Sullivan of Maynooth, and Aaron McNally of Johnstown Bridge. Midfielders goes to Dan Lynham of Cara and Aaron Masterson of Moorfield, 2 big men. The half forwards then Ryan Carney of Sarsfields, Derek Kerwin of Naas, and Conor Doyle of Athy. And the full forward line, Conor O'Donovan of Sarsfields, Ryan Zinke of Naas, and Owen Cully of Carbery. And there was absolute, total and utter unanimity in the selection of that team. Not. Who were the winners? Who were those who maybe lost out and could have been there? But it's a very strong team, I suppose, Tommy.
Yeah, I mean it is a strong team. I need to do something. I'm trying to think of what to do, and whether it's to make some kind of a summary of the WhatsApp group chat when these teams are being decided. These aren't just picked out of the air. And this was a tasty enough week in the chat there. I think a couple of lads went quiet for a few hours afterwards. There were different opinions on it. But it is, I mean, just, starting to back Owen Sheehan. I thought Owen Sheehan was fantastic. I mean, a huge presence in that goals for Johnstone Bridge. But his kickouts, Pat, again, that was a game you were covering at. Massive kickouts. Again, there was a win, as Ger said about the match in Conlon. It's like there was a win, but it wasn't a huge win. No. God, Owen just drives them a mile. He was driving it right down to the other half. But again, really commanding under the high ball as well. And same with then the other Johnstone Bridge, Ger McNally. I mean, Richard, you probably could have picked a few of those lads in the half back line around midfield based on that second half performance. The Tony Archibald was somebody that everybody wanted in that saw the Selbridge match because of his influence. But Dean O'Donoghue was in the frame for a while as well. Because again, he was excellent at half back and has been so far this year. So there are a couple of people that missed out in around there. The Naas forward line, Kerwin and Sinky. I mean, even those positions, they were the only places we could probably put them in, even though obviously Sinky was in the corner. But their performances that I saw again last week, I mean, that's the big thing about Naas this year. They were a little bit loose at the back against Maynooth, and they did give away a couple of goals, and they were soft enough goals as well. But in the forwards, there aren't too many teams in the county that can match them. Just they can turn it on 5-10 minutes, and when you have Kerwin and Sinky, different level.
Absolutely. Ger, anybody you would have liked to seen in there, or are you happy with everything that's in it?
But I was just thinking, like, that the standard is so high now, and maybe along with the 2-pointers as well, that scoring tallies don't necessarily kind of guarantee a place in the team. I think Brian McLaughlin of Clane scored 9. I think Owen Bagnall for Allenwood scored 8. Was it 8?
9 as well, yeah.
9. Colin Moore, I think, as well for a tie was 7 points as well, including a couple of 2-pointers. So
he's outstanding, lads, this year. He's outstanding this year, Colin Moore.
Yeah, he is super talented. And then as well, I suppose we saw as well Elliot Byrne as well. I think Clubber gave him Man of the Match award, and he's a hard-working forward, and sometimes maybe those hard-working link forwards get overlooked in these teams because of all the scoring tallies that some of the guys rack up. But just 2 lads I want to just quickly mention were the 2 Sarsfields lads in the attack there, Ryan Carney and Conor O'Donovan. Not lads that I've seen a huge amount of, but Sarsfields, as I said, without Dara Ryan, they needed a couple of players to stand up, and those 2 players really did step forward. And Conor O'Donovan got a goal. I think he had an assist as well, and Ryan Carney got 5 points from play. And I'd venture to say that's probably the most influential senior football championship game they've had for their club so far, but probably not the last, looking at the talent and ability that both of them have.
Quick look at it from your point of view, Richard.
Yeah, I think I'd just call out maybe Owen Cully as well. He's the only player, if I'm right, that made it in both teams last week and this week. So that's fantastic consistency. Obviously, he's going to have a bad weekend when he loses to Eadstown this weekend, but at least he's had two good weeks.
Yeah, watch out for Cathal McCarran, lads. He is a very experienced player. He's doing very well for a tie, and I expect him to appear on the team of the week very, very shortly as well. So there you are. That's the first ever loading and lifting Kildare Nationalist Senior Football Team of the Week, and congratulations to everybody there. And we're getting quite a lot of I can see clubs congratulating their players on being on the team as well. So well done to everybody. Richard, you had a little post during the week there about comparing the scores and the difference in scores between last year and this year. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I suppose I'll give a bit of credit to Don't Foul on Twitter as well, who started me thinking about this, because he posted something. He was comparing the championships across, I think, about a dozen different counties, and Kildare was coming in a little bit low in terms of the total number of points per game against the other counties. Only a little bit below average. I think we were 36 against 38, and I started, as I tend to do, I started drilling down a bit. So I had a look at the both for senior and intermediate, the first 16 games this year versus last year. And I suppose it's generally positive. In both competitions, we've got significantly higher scoring, and it's not just down to the 2-pointers. So if you take the senior championship, we've got 43 goals against 33 in the first 16 games this year versus last year, 454 points against 361. So in total, 583 points against 460. And of the points, 57 were 2-pointers. So that was another thing I wanted just to see. Are we getting a lot? It feels like we're getting a lot more 2-pointers than maybe we saw watching the county team. And now obviously it's summer football, it's club football where maybe defenses are a bit looser. But that's still a pretty impressive total for 57 for across the 16 games. And there was only one game, I think, was Maynooth and Kilcock that didn't produce a 2-pointer across the 2 championships. So overall, we're up on all averages across there. The one that's slightly, I suppose, concerning in a way is the margin of win has gone up from 6.4 to 8.3 in the senior championship. So I think that's probably a factor of the 2-pointers a little bit as well. But I suppose the other thing that struck me was, they're talking about maybe bringing in 4 points for a goal. Yeah. And when you see 10 extra goals across the senior championship, it looks like all the other rule changes are creating more goals, at least at club level, and it's the same in the intermediate. I'll just have a quick look. The intermediate, we've 11 more goals than last year so far. So I'm not sure the 4 points for a goal is needed.
3 points is enough for a goal. 3 points is enough for a goal. Okay, that's it. Well, we'll keep an eye on that, Richard. Maybe you'll do it on a regular basis.
I'll have to now, won't I?
Yeah, you will. Well, we'll give you a week off for electric picnic. Moving on swiftly then to the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship, and in round 1 there were wins for Rathangan and Milltown in Group A. In Group B, Sallins and Ballyteague. That was an interesting one. In Group C, St. Lawrence's and Kilcullen. And finally then in Group D, Leixlip and another interesting one, Suncroft. So, Ger, who were the winners and losers and in the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship in round 1?
Yeah, so I only saw 2 of these games over the weekend, and of those, Rathangan, they were so impressive in St. Connor's Park, and on and off the field. I have to give, indeed, even the Ellistown supporters, they really had a kind of a championship feel to it, but the Rathangan supporters were incredible. They were giving standing ovation to substitutes coming off the field and all that, and even, they got on their feet again to rouse their team as they left the field at the end of play. But I think people were a little bit, there were some eyebrows raised when Rathangan defeated Leixlip, I think, in the preliminary round, but I think Rathangan just rubber stamped their position now as real, proper, out-and-out championship contenders this year, the way they kind of saw off Ellistown, who were on the back of an excellent win against St. Lawrence's. They've got some excellent forwards. Maurice Curtin came in there, Aaron Tehan, Rian Tehan obviously has been in with the county team this year, and he that's ability showed as well. Connor Jemison, I think Daniel Mopeter, their fullback as well, was very good as well. And bar, I think Harry Donnelly scored 6 points for Ellistown, and bar him, I think Rathangan dealt with Ellistown's challenge very well indeed. So yeah, I'll definitely be looking forward to seeing Rathangan again, and that game against Milltown on Sunday. Maybe we'll talk about that later on, but that looks to be a real mouth-watering tie, because I suppose of the games that I didn't see and just going on reports, obviously Milltown, the way that they turned around things against Strafford was hugely impressive. They were 8 points down at the half-time break, but according to a reporter, Colin McCarthy, they just kind of stuck at their game. They didn't panic, and even I think John Tracy had an excellent game for Strafford again, but Milltown just wore them down. A couple of goals laid on and got through, so that was a superb victory for them. And then in Group B, first up, Sallins. Anytime a team beats Sallins, anytime a team beats Castledermot by such a big score, it's kind of an eye-raising win, because Castledermot, even when they're going badly, they know who to dig in. They don't tend to get on the end of big defeats too often. So for Sallins to win by that size of a margin really is an eye-catching result, and obviously on the back of an excellent campaign in Division 1. They come into the Intermediate Championship this year with a little bit of a pressure. I think they've obviously maybe flattered to deceive the last couple of years, but I think they're probably the standout team in amongst some really good teams. And at the top 5 or 6 teams, there's probably not a huge amount between them, but you'd have to say probably Sallins are just at the top of that at the moment, and that win really does rubber stamp that. Well, yeah, Ballyteague, what a victory. Ballyteague against Round Towers, and Ballyteague obviously playing without Jimmy Hyland at the moment, and maybe for the entirety of the championship, possibly without Jimmy Hyland. But they've got 2 wins now. They had a good win in the preliminary round and backed that up. I think Round Towers will probably be disappointed with that, maybe, and again, a side who we expect a lot of, and a lot of good players in that side. So for them to go down to Ballyteague was probably disappointing for them. But yeah, great win for Ballyteague. And Then the other game that I was at, Kilcullen against St. Kevin's, I was probably a little bit surprised that Kilcullen came through this game in the end and got a win. I kind of fancied Kevin's to win, albeit to be a tight enough game, and that's the way it proved. I think for 45 minutes, I think the sides were level. St. Kevin's hit the crossbar. I think, Tommy, you were watching at home on Clubber, you were texting, I think, straight away that the shot, I think it was a Conor Murray had the shot that hit the crossbar, bounced down. You were saying that possibly went over the line, but it was so well struck and happened in such a blink of an eye that it was hard to call, bar the television. I haven't seen it back since, so I don't know if it was kind of.
There was one player blocking it on the line. Now, in fairness to the umpires, they didn't blink. But Connor, I meant to ask Connor. I'm going to text him after this, actually. I'm going to ask him, because he would have had the best view. But I was just looking at the angle of it, and the angle of the way it hit the underside of the post and the way it came out, or the underside of the crossbar and came out, looked to me like it could have been over the line. But listen, I was watching it on Clubber. The umpires were 4 yards away, so it
was one of those ones from the back of the stand. Now, again, you can't say definitively, but I wouldn't have been surprised if they were reaching for the green flag, because it looked so close. But it had a huge impact, because then I think it was around the 45th minute. By the 51st minute, I think Kilcullen were 6 points ahead. Thomas Hickey scored a point, and then the superb Kieran O'Brien was fed well by Sean Knight, collected the ball and a good finish, and then Hickey got a 2-pointer, and all of a sudden, kind of from a tight game, suddenly Kilcullen had a 6-point lead, and they saw it out from there. So, they have a big local derby coming up. But I don't think Kilcullen have won more than one game in the championships that's coming up from junior back in 21. So they have 2 big local derbies now to maybe better that against St. Lawrence's and first up 2 Mile House on Sunday. And just lastly then, Group D then, just quickly then as well, great win for Suncroft, obviously a local derby. We spoke about that last week. It was a local derby, but with the added spice of probably victory being enough to assure the winner of a place in the intermediate ranks for next year, and the loser obviously will be facing into a couple of difficult rounds ahead. But Suncroft, I think Fionn Dowling is having quite the season so far with Suncroft, and also Tom Martin as well in midfield, an excellent game too. So big win for Suncroft there, and Nurney and Monster 11, we'll talk about their game as well. That's going to be some game this weekend as well, a huge tie for both teams as well.
It's just going back to Sallins, Castledermot. Sallins were hugely impressive in that game, and in particular James Dalton, who scored 3-3, I think, in that particular game. There were 3-9 to 3 points up at half time, and then 4-16 to 6 in the end. And then I was also doing the 2 Mile House St. Lawrence's game. Larry's were out of the gap at half time, 117 to 4 points up, but it was pulled back, and there was a penalty there as well in the second half for 2 Mile House. If they'd scored that, it would have brought it back to 3 points, and Larry's did see it out in the end, but it was a struggle for them on the second half performance. So it'd be interesting to see what will happen to them going forward. Richard, your take on the intermediate?
Yeah, just interesting that you mentioned Larry's there, and I was curious to see how they'd bounce back from that Ellistown disappointment, I suppose, in the preliminary round. And it's interesting, they're still second favourites, I saw in the bookies, ahead of Rathangan and Milltown for 2 teams. I mean, for me, if we were doing power rankings at the moment, I think Sallins would clearly be out in front, but not a million miles ahead of Rathangan in particular. And then Milltown, they really had to dig in against Straffan. That was a fine performance by Straffan as well, and a great game, that one. So I'm curious. Larry's a bit like maybe Salbridge in the senior championship, just haven't really hit the ground running at all, but they do have talent there, and they've had a good season in the league, so you'd expect them to come strong. Can we get a sponsor for a funniest moment of the week? Because I have 2 from one game, if I can throw them in there quick.
Go on. You're like Paddy Crosby. Have you got a funny incident?
So I was watching now only on Clubber, but I was watching Ballyteague and Towers, and there were two funny moments in that one. One was when the Ballyteague goalkeeper took a kick out to absolutely no one, kicking out to his left. It was a short kick out, but as it transpired, one of their subs was on the sideline, relatively close to the goal, and he obviously mistook him for one of the 15 on the field. He wasn't wearing a high-vis jacket or whatever, a tracksuit top or anything. So that was a little bit funny. But the even funnier one I was chuckling was late on, Towers got a very close range free, and Ger O'Brien stood up to kind of tap it over. I think they were 2 points behind at the time. They still had time to get another score, so you're fully expecting him to tap it over. But of course, Dad Jason is on the field at this stage, and he's around midfield, but he starts charging up the field towards the young demanding the ball. And of course, if you're Jay, you're thinking, "Oh, geez, what do I do here?" But anyway, he took the probably the right option from a family perspective and passed the ball short to Jason. But they then ran into trouble, and obviously the chance went away. So I was really chuckling about that and what conversations were had in that household on when was that, Saturday night.
Funny, Richard, just when you mentioned that. Sorry, just about the father and son element there of Round Towers. They're obviously on the same team, but Group A is very interesting in the Donnelly household because Dad Johnny manages the Milltown team and son Evan plays for Ellistown. So in round 3, which potentially could be a huge game for both teams, they'll be going head to head. And I'm not quite sure if Evan still lives at home or what the circumstances are there, but no doubt that'll be an interesting family for the week or so building up towards that game as well in round 3. Only in the GAA could you find that.
Yeah, isn't there? The brothers Marshall playing for 2 different teams. Is it one play for Kilcullen and one plays for is it 2 Mile House as well? Is it? Alan Marshall and the brother.
Salins is my
Yeah. There you go.
The Kerwins as well.
There's the Kerwins too. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's 2 down as well. There's 2 Jackmans. One is playing for Castledermot and one is playing for Athy. 2 brothers. So there's probably more out there.
Yeah, Paul Clinch is back in the goal for St. Lawrence's these days. He did have a spell with Athy as well up against his brother Niall, who's been a long-serving stalwart for Lawrence's. Yeah,
I think a few of the Lawrence's players played underage with Athy as well. So we could have an all-county team yet playing in the championship. But they used to do that years ago. The Army team was an all-county team, whatever. Anyway, let's have a look at the fixtures for next weekend in the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship. In Group A, it's Milltown versus Rathangan, mouth-watering on Sunday. And that's in Mangard 1 at 2:30. Straffan and Ellistown on Sunday in Clane at 4:30. In Group B, it's Salins versus Ballyteague in Cedars and Conlon. That's on Thursday night at 7:45. And Round Towers versus Castledermot, probably a local derby as well, you might say, Saturday in Kilcullen at 3 p.m. In Group C, then, it's Kevin's versus Larry's on Friday in Mangard 1 at 7:45. Kilcullen versus 2 Mile House. Again, a derby that's on Sunday in Mangard 1 at 1 o'clock. And then in Group D, it's another one, Norrie versus Monastrevin on Friday in Round Towers at 8 o'clock. And Suncroft versus Leakslip, an important one Sunday. That's in Clane at 1:30. And when we're thinking about it, I know Mick Mullen has said they have 2 county grounds in Mangard Park and in Cedars and Conlon Park. But fair play to the likes of Kilcullen, to Round Towers, to Clane, and whoever else has hosted championship matches and indeed have been doing it very well. But Richard, your quick look at I suppose the standout games in the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship Round 2.
I think we mentioned Milltown and Rathangan is probably the one that appeals most in Group A, both having won their opening games. That's going to be a cracker, I think, in Mangar Park on Sunday. Straff and Ellistown actually in the same group holds a lot of interest as well. I know Ellistown lost heavily to Rathangan, but they did have a very good win over Larry, so they'll still be competitive, very competitive, I think, against Straffan. Salins Ballyteague obviously both going well as well, so we've got the top 2 in this group as well. In fact, we got the top 2 playing in 3 of the 4 groups. I think it's just Group C where you don't have that scenario. So in Group D, you have Leakslip and Suncroft. Obviously Leakslip, you'd expect to win that one. But Suncroft will get the boost from that big win over their local neighbours, Nerney, last weekend. So yeah, intrigue all around. I think Nerney and Monasterevin is that's a huge game. I suppose at the bottom of Group D, both of those still again relative neighbours, I suppose. And both trying to avoid the drop primarily in the first instance to junior football.
Yeah, and I suppose, Tommy, you'll be keeping a close eye on Round Towers versus Castledermot.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, the two of them would be disappointed after round 1. So it's the Towers have gone back. Or just Richard was talking about the betting there. I mean, you can get 16-1 on Round Towers at the moment for the Intermediate Championship. I think they were second or third favourites at the start. So it goes to show you, I don't know who's advising the bookies, but the form is something else. But Towers will just be reeling from that defeat last week to Ballyteague. By all accounts, that pretty devastating for them. And Castledermot as well. They were very disappointed against Sallins. I will say for the first 10 or 15 minutes in that Sallins game, Castledermot had a lot of possession. A lot of possession. They owned the ball for long periods and they just kicked too many wides. And Sallins absolutely punished them. And then the second half was a bit of a damn squib anyway. I wouldn't. The big row just on the halftime whistle kind of almost ended the game as well, because they both teams came out and it was all very tentative in the second half. But yeah, we'll see how both teams kick on this week, Castledermot and Towers. But they're two teams that seriously need to put in a performance.
Kilcullen and 2 Mile House then?
That's anybody I talked to from either club. They're all looking at this game, even before round one. You know, they're all obviously they know each other very well out that direction. But 2 Mile House need to win this game. Kilcullen had such a fantastic win over St. Kevin's in the first game, takes a little bit of pressure off them. But 2 Mile House need to get a result here. I don't know. That second half in St. Lawrence's will probably stand to them. But I think 2 Mile House might step up this weekend to try and drag themselves out, just like they did last year in that Group D. You know, they picked up that one big, when they went down to the relegation finals, but they got that one big performance, you know, to stay up. But that's a cracking game. Anybody that was on Sunday in Mangard Park.
Here's a stat for you, Tommy. The teams that have gone down from intermediate in the last 2 years have been the team that won the relegation final the year before. So 2 Mile House won the relegation final last year, so they're in the hot seat.
God, Richard, okay. I love your stats.
Finally, then, Ger, your nap in the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship in round 2 this weekend.
Oh, nap, got it. You know, it really is a kind of intrigue. League Step ourselves would be the obvious winners, and League Step will probably win all 3 games in those group stages. They probably won't get much credit for it. They would be expected, I suppose, to be a little bit better, and really, I suppose, they themselves will be expected to be a little bit better than 3 sides who are, I suppose, just searching for the victories to keep them up. League Step still have genuine title aspirations, so I think that's probably the one game where you can see a clear winner, but there's a lot of 50-50 games after that. It's St. Kevin's and St. Lawrence's. That's another big one, because St. Kevin's are another side to, you know, they're always thereabouts. They're strong, experienced players, and looking through their team there, night against Kilcullen, they have so many players who have given so many years service, and they don't roll over easily. And St. Lawrence's, you know, as Richard said there, they probably haven't hit the heights that they would have expected dropping down to this level after relegation last year. And if they're not at the best, that could be maybe a surprise there. And Strafford and Ellistown is another one. I haven't seen Strafford, actually, maybe I haven't seen them for a couple of years, but they've done really well so far this year. And probably disappointed to let things slip themselves against Milltown last week, but that'll be another game to keep an eye out for them. But obviously, Milltown Rathangan, that could potentially, maybe even, you know, if things were to play out down the line, you know, it could be as good as a final. Really, they're as Richard mentioned, power rankings, they're probably seed 2 and 3 at the moment in the Intermediate Championship. So going head to head like that will be a fantastic game. And you know, Milltown have come on so much over the last few years that they're probably the most improved club in terms of going from Division 4 obviously into Division 1 next year, and they're here now right in the mix for the Intermediate Championship as well. So it's going to be a great game. I'm sure that Rathangan supporters will be there in force again. As I said, they brought a lot of colour and atmosphere to the game last Sunday in Connacht, so I'm sure they'll do the same again on Sunday.
Well, we're all looking forward to those games. And for those of you who may not be able to make the games, of course, all 16 games in the Joe Mallon Motor Senior Football Championship and the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship, they're shown live on Clubber TV, and there is coverage also on KFM Radio. And of course, you can read all about it in next Tuesday's Kildare Nationalist. Moving quickly along then to the team of the week in the loading and lifting Kildare Forklifts Intermediate. The Kildare Nationalist Intermediate Team of the Week. David Craddock of 2 Mile House was the goalkeeper. Rory O'Donnell of Sallins, Dan Mulpeter of Rathangan, and Brian Gibbons of Leakship on the full back line. The half back line, Oisin Grufferty, St. Lawrence's, Pordick Hanley, Ballyteague, John Tracy, Straffan. The midfielders were Tom Martin of Suncroft and Rian Tehan of Rathangan. Another Tehan at wing forward, that's Aaron. Sean Dowling, we mentioned him earlier, at centre half forward, and Ben Kern of Milltown at wing forward. And then the full forward line, James Dalton of Sallins, Felix Laurer of St. Lawrence's. Great 2-pointers he scored in last week. And Kieran O'Brien, another player who can score. Team of the week, Ger, happy with that?
Yeah, again, some big scoring tallies there. Kieran O'Brien, I mentioned James Dalton, we spoke as well, to have 3-3 in a championship game against Castledermot is outstanding. So yeah, there's some really good performers. Fionn Dowling's been very consistent so far for Suncroft as well. The two Tehan brothers there as well, excellent for Athangan. So yeah, all round. John Tracy as well, another one who's had kind of a really good consistent start. And David Craddock as well in goal for Two Mile House. He's an interesting kind of man. He played plenty of soccer underage. I think he went over to Aberdeen in Scotland, had a spell over there, and maybe even made the bench for the first time on a couple of occasions there, and was capped at underage level for Ireland as well. But I think he was in with the Kildare panel at the start of last year as well, when they were going through a kind of wide range of players, and he was in the mix maybe to make the final squad. But obviously I think he scored 7 points at the weekend, which is an incredible tally for a goalkeeper. But so they're getting used to those tallies these days for goalkeepers to come forward and could kick like he did. But kicked 3 2-pointers and a free as well, was very impressive from the Two Mile House man for a side that was struggling, I suppose, at different stages against Lawrence's. He kept them in the game and gave them a real belief to maybe go on and catch Lawrence's in the second half there. So yeah, he definitely deserves a place there too.
Well, congratulations to all who made the Intermediate Championship Team of the Week. That's the Loading and Lifting Kildare National Intermediate Championship Team of the Week. Tommy, we're at the Junior Football Championship, the Town Cross Junior Football Championship. It's round 4, and in round 4 we have Castlemitchell versus Kildangan. That's on Thursday night at 7:45. Ballymore Eustace versus Kill on Sunday at 4:15, and Grange have a bye. That's in Group A, and in the Group B, Ardclough versus Ballykelly, Rathcoffey versus Athgarvan. The Ardclough versus Ballykelly game is on Thursday at 7:30 in Mangard, and Rathcoffey versus Athgarvan is in Clane on Saturday, and then Kappa versus Robertstown is also in Clane on Saturday. That's at 3:30. Top of Group A is Grange, Ballymore and Kill and Castlemitchell all on 2 points. And in Group B, as you can see there, Athgarvan top on 6 points, very tight then. Robertstown, Rathcoffey and Kappa all on 4 points each. Tommy, your thoughts on round 4 and where it's all going? Is this really the moving round in the Tom Cross Transport Junior Football Championship?
Yeah, it is. And funnily enough, if it is moving weekend, the one team that probably don't really need to move aren't even playing, because Grange are just fantastic so far. The performances they've put in. They beat Castlemitchell last week 4-21 to 8 points, and people would have thought that would have been a lot closer based on what Castlemitchell did against Kill the previous week. But Grange just showed they're going up different levels. In that Group A, quickly, so that Ballymore versus Kill game, so that might be that's going to be very important come the final round, because obviously Grange have beaten Ballymore, but if Kill can beat Ballymore this weekend and get up to 4 points, the final round is Grange versus Kill. So that will be basically a playoff to see who goes directly into that semi-final. And Junior, if you go in, Grange have found out themselves in the last couple of years, going into that quarter final can be hairy enough. So that'll be one to keep an eye on. And then Group B, I mean, it's there in front of you how tight it is. I just fucking love the Junior Championship. And this year the standard has gone up so much. Like you see that even the Robertstown at Garvan game at the weekend, where at Garvan got over the line. There was a friend of mine that was home from Australia, and it was a long time to see around, but he used to play junior football. He was just standing there going, the days of the big lad in full forward, it's gone. He just couldn't believe the standard of it. But you see this weekend then, Rathcoffey at Garvan, like our Clock Ballykelly, will be getting a feeler for each other probably ahead of that Junior A Championship. In fairness to our Clock last week, a bit more of a spread in the scores. I mean, they shipped the defeat again, 2-19 to 7 points, but they had a bit more of a spread of scores in the game. They weren't relying on Kyle Kelly. So, that might be an interesting game from our Clock point of view, just to try to get something on the board. But those other 2 games are cracking. I mean, Rathcoffey versus Athgarvan. Athgarvan are flying the top of the group. Rathcoffey are also putting in some good performances. And then Kappa versus Robertstown. It's just great stuff. And that's a double header in Clane on Saturday for any junior football fans to head over for a double header. But,
I think I'm covering that game for you, Jerry. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to leading your course.
Those two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Richard, any surprises for you briefly in the Tom Cross Junior Championship?
Not surprises. Well, I think that just Tommy mentioned it. The scale of the win for Grange over Castlemitchell was a bit of an earth-shattering one. I think most of my attention's on Group B, to be honest. I think those 2 games at the weekend in Clane are going to be absolute humdingers and toss-ups, frankly. But as Tommy, I think, mentioned last week, one of those four is going to drop into the Junior A, and it's one hell of a dogfight. Hard to tip winners. I mean, Athgarvan have won 3, but Rathcoffey have been good as well. Kappa, I've been impressed with. They were very close to beating Athgarvan, as we know. So I'd have a sneaky feeling Kappa might beat Robertstown. And I wouldn't be surprised if Rathcoffey beat Athgarvan either. That would certainly put the cat among the pigeons in terms of the group.
Okay, and then the loading and lifting Kildare Forklifts Junior Football Championship Team of the Week. If we can throw that one up, Tommy, let's have a look at that. Sean O'Malan is from Athgarvan, the goalkeeper. Cole Lyons of Robertstown, Jack Salmon of Ballymore Eustace, and Thomas Brown of Kildare in the full-back line. The halfbacks, Killian McGovern of Rathcoffey, Den Carter of Kappa, and Brian Cullen of Grange and Alvin. Another Grange man, Keith McGloin, is partnering Dara Cosgrove of Robertstown in midfield. The half-forwards then, Jordan Nolan Mullally of Athgarvan, Owen Dunn of Athgarvan, and Killian Bergen of Grange and Alvin. And another Grange player, Nathan Doyle, is at top of the right. And Ian Murphy of Ballymore Eustace is full forward, and DJ Percival again is of Robertstown is at left corner forward. Tommy, no arguments of those?
Oh, plenty. But in fairness, I mean, we're going with our usual. There has to be a Bergen in the Team of the Week every week. But I mean,
well, there won't be next week.
Hey, there you go.
Won't be next week.
I think Killian scored 2-3 at the weekend. It's huge to have him back in for Grange as well. To keep McGloin in the middle. If anybody's out seen Grange play, how much of a powerhouse he is in the middle. Another great week. Nathan Doyle has probably been unlucky previous weeks not to get in. He scored 1-3. Great link man up there working with Fionn Bergen. Niall Murphy had a good performance against Ballymore Eustace. DJ Percival is putting in some huge scores this year. A lot of Kildare people would know him from the underage setup in Kildare over the years, but he's linking up well with Brian Kennedy. There for Robertstown, they're ticking nicely. Same with Killian McGovern flying wing back for Rathcoffey. Always very important player from them. Glenn Carter's on for back-to-back weeks. I know Richie, you were impressed when you've seen him in the past as well. Yeah. Brian Cullen has been brilliant for Grange so far this year. So yeah, it's a pretty solid team in fairness. A couple lads probably at this point have missed out, but it's impressive.
Next week, lads. Go on. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, I think Fionn Bergen scored 1-9. Was that this week or was that last week? Maybe
1-9. Yep.
1-9. Yeah, and didn't make it. Just shows you.
Well, again, it depends. It goes on opposition. It goes on the mood that people are in when they're picking in the WhatsApp groups.
And there are no brown envelopes.
None whatsoever.
Anyway, that's the loading and lifting Kildare Nationalist Junior Football Championship Team of the Week, and that's our preview and review and overview of the Kildare Nationalist, the Kildare GAA Championships at intermediate, at senior, and indeed at junior level. As I said, all 16 games in the intermediate and senior level will be shown live on Clubber, and there will also be coverage on KFM radio, and you can read all about it on the 3 championship competitions in the Kildare Nationalist next Tuesday. Ger, we have a few bits of news as well. There was great news from down under this morning with the news that Nyasa Dooley, who we featured online on the Kildare Nationalist last week, she's in Craig Stashovich's Brisbane Lions squad for the first time on Saturday when the round 2 of the AWFL game, and that's away to Fremantle. A match that will be shown live on TG Cahir, and NASA has been named as one of the 5 interchange players on the Lions squad. So we have to say congratulations to her. Talking to her last week, she's in great form and was quite confident that she would be on the playing squad, the match day squad, very, very soon.
Yeah, it's great to hear, and another game for Kildare sports fans to keep an eye on over the weekend. We've all spoke to Nessa down through the years as well and seen her play on the Kildare teams, and lovely girl, fantastic player, and it was great to read your interview with her there, Pat, and kind of get up to date with how she has settled into life down under. Obviously, I think I have to brush up my AFL knowledge, but I think they're a little bit surprised to have lost last week's games. The Brisbane Lions obviously have made a couple of changes, brought Nessa in, and hopefully she takes her opportunity with both hands, and definitely be keeping an eye on that game. It's great to see. any of the Kildare sports people and any of the sports, succeeding in a professional sphere, whether it's in England with soccer lads or women, or over in Australia now with Nessa. And, we've had plenty of lads have a chance down there, thinking back to the likes of Paul Cribben, Paddy Brophy, Daniel Flynn. I don't think any of them ever broke through to actually play a kind of a regular league game. So to see Nessa do this, it's a huge achievement so early in her career down under, and no better woman to make the most of it, I'm sure.
Well, I'm very grateful to you, Ger, for organising to send me over to cover that game on Saturday in Fremantle. I'm very happy to do so on your behalf. And don't worry, I'll make it over, and I might make it back as well.
As long as you're back for next week's podcast, Pat.
Yeah, we'll try that. No luck, unfortunately, for Newbridge Town in the Sports Direct Women's FAI Women's Cup. That played against Bows. You were at that game on Station Road last week, Ger. Played well, but unfortunately, the I suppose full time against the part timers was the difference, maybe.
Yeah, kind of caught up on them. Tommy was just flashing up the back page there. For 60 seconds, everything seemed possible for Newbridge. They got a goal early in the second half. They conceded a goal from a penalty after about 8 minutes, and it would have been easy to kind of crumble in the face of a lot of pressure. But a 5-player defence, they really dug in. They had Caitlin Kennedy at the heart of the defence with two Ellas, Doyle and Gleeson either side of her in the centre, and Brooke Donovan in front of them in the midfield, and then Abby Stafford in a kind of lone striker role up front. And they really made things difficult for Bowles in the first half. They lost the right full, though, Hayley Murray, and that needed a bit of a reshuffle. And Abby Stafford had to move out to the right side of midfield rather than kind of that lone striker role that she was doing so well. Then into the second half, they got that goal. Orla Fitzpatrick would have been some story. She only signed for Newbridge Town literally the day before the quarterfinal draw was made from Bohemians. So, of course, it was her that popped up and got that equalising goal. And it was great seeing a big crowd there in Station Road. And, just for a while, it was less than a minute in the end, but we were just thinking maybe that a huge upset could be possible. But I suppose maybe Newbridge just got carried away a little bit. They're also without Brooke Dunn. She was actually off injured at the time of the goal, and she had to stay off. Unfortunately, she couldn't come back on. But they were still down to 10 players when Bowles equalised less than a minute. Sorry, when Bowles took that lead again after less than a minute after that equaliser. And it was still 3-1 with about 15 minutes to go. And it was only in the last 15 minutes when Newbridge had to change 3 of their backline as one goal for different reasons that Bowles were able to rattle in 4 goals and kind of put on a one-sided look. But just a special mention to our goalkeeper, Kate Foley, as well, who, if ever a goalkeeper was outstanding while conceding 7 goals, it was her. In the first half, she wasn't overly worked in terms of making big saves, but she was flawless with her handling and collecting crosses and any kind of long-range shots. And then in the second half, she made some outstanding saves as well, and it could have been a bigger scoreline only for her. So, all around an excellent kind of journey and an historic occasion for Brian Kay's team, and they look now, I suppose, to carry that form into their domestic season and the remainder of what's left in it.
Well, we keep an eye on that. So that's that, and commiserations again to Newbridge Town. No football next week because of Electric Picnic. Well, no Kildare GAA matches really at the weekend because of Electric Picnic. But before that, Richard, we have the hurling championships resuming at senior level on Wednesday and Thursday. Really, is there anything to stop Naas certainly getting to a final or at least a semi-final?
I don't think there is really. I think it's a bit unfortunate the hurling has had to take such a break. I don't quite understand why we have football 3 weeks in a row, and we've had a month pretty much with no hurling. So I'll even need to take a look at the fixtures myself and remind myself of the tables at this point. But no, I don't think anyone is going to bet against Naas at the moment. I don't think they've shown any signs of reduced powers this year. But it's an interesting championship nonetheless in terms of I think they have raised the standards for the other clubs, and I think other clubs are starting to raise their own standards accordingly. So I think there's still plenty of interest in that championship.
Well, we'll have a deeper look at the hurling championship, the UPMC hurling championship next week on the podcast here. But that is it for this week. And my thanks to Ger, to Richard, and to Tommy. I'm Pat Costello. Good luck to all teams taking part this weekend. Enjoy your games, and we'll see you next week.